Laughter echoed through the lobby like glass shattering. People turned to look, some chuckled, others looked away. But no one said a word. An old black woman, her back slightly bent with age, stood at the reception desk clutching an envelope. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the effort of holding on to her dignity. Across from her, a young man in a crisp blue suit leaned back in his chair, smirking. He was tall, good-looking in that careless way some men are, with charm as cheap as his cologne. "Ma'am," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "this is a corporate office, not a church bake sale. Maybe you took the wrong bus." Laughter rippled around the room. The woman's eyes, warm, intelligent, patient, never flinched. She simply nodded, pressed the envelope to her chest, and turned to leave. As she walked out into the blazing Georgia sun, the young man leaned to his coworker and muttered, "Bet she's here begging for donations. Some people never learn when to retire." He didn't know that those were the most expensive words he'd ever speak, because the woman he had just humiliated was about to become his new CO. And by the time she was done with him, he'd learned that karma doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it walks in wearing pearls and a smile. In the sleepy town of Magnolia Ridge, Georgia, time seemed to run a little slower than the rest of the world. The streets still smelled faintly of pine after every rain, and the old diner on Main Street kept serving coffee that tasted just like it did 50 years ago. Folks waved when they passed each other, even if they didn't mean it, and gossip traveled faster than a summer storm. On a warm Monday morning, Miss Thelma Brooks adjusted the brim of her faded straw hat and stepped off the number 3 bus, holding a worn leather handbag close to her chest. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her floral dress freshly ironed, and her brown skin carried the map of a life well lived, lines carved from laughter, pain, and survival. At 68, Thelma had lived enough years to know that people's kindness often ended where their judgment began. Still, she moved through life with quiet grace. She had been a teacher for 30 years, loved by students and parents alike. But few people knew she once had another life, decades earlier, before her husband's illness, before returning home to care for her dying mother. Back then, she'd worked in Atlanta's corporate world, climbing faster than anyone expected a young black woman to climb in the 1980s. Now she was back in Magnolia Ridge, retired and living off her pension, spending her mornings volunteering at the local community center. That particular morning, Thelma was running late. The center's director had asked her to stop by Wexler and Sons Logistics, one of the town's biggest employers, to discuss a small grant for the after-school reading program. Thelma didn't like begging for money, but she loved her kids, and she wasn't about to let the program die. The company had recently gone through a change in ownership, and rumor had it that the new CEO was coming down from corporate headquarters in Atlanta, someone powerful, someone secretive. Thelma didn't know who yet, but she prayed whoever it was had a heart. The office building stood tall and sterile on the edge of town, its glass windows reflecting the morning sun. Inside, the air conditioning bit into her skin as she stepped toward the reception desk. A young man sat behind it, Chase Turner, early 30s, slick blonde hair, smug smirk. He looked up from his phone and immediately rolled his eyes. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he said, dragging out the ma'am like an insult. "Yes," Thelma said softly, pulling an envelope from her purse. "I'm here to drop off a letter for Mr. Wexler. It's from the Magnolia Ridge Community Center. It's about the reading." Chase interrupted her with a fake smile. Right. The charity thing. You can leave it there." He pointed lazily to a side table stacked with other envelopes. Thelma blinked. "It's rather important," she said. "I was hoping to speak with someone about—" "Ma'am," Chase said again, his tone sharper now. "We don't take walk-ins. Especially not from volunteers." The words hung heavy in the air. Thelma's lips pressed together. "I see," she said quietly. "Well, thank you for your time." She turned to leave, but as she did, a group of younger employees walked by. Chase snickered loud enough for them to hear. "Guess we're taking charity requests from church ladies now," he muttered. "Maybe she'll pray our quarterly earnings up." The young employees laughed. Thelma paused mid-step, her back straightening ever so slightly. She didn't turn around. Instead, she adjusted her hat, gathered what dignity she had left, and walked out the door. But she didn't forget his face. Not Chase Turner. Outside, she sat on the bus stop bench, watching cars pass by. Her heart hurt, not because of the insult, but because it reminded her that nothing had changed. After all her years, after all her progress, there were still boys who thought they were men simply because someone hadn't taught them better. A little boy ran past chasing a ball. His laughter broke through her thoughts. She smiled softly. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, and it wouldn't be the last. What she didn't know was that the winds of fate were already shifting. 3 hours away, on the 32nd floor of a skyscraper in downtown Atlanta, a meeting was taking place behind closed doors. Executives sat around a long mahogany table, sipping coffee and checking their watches. At the head sat Arthur Langford, chairman of the board of Wexler Holdings, the parent company of the Magnolia Ridge branch. "Let's get started," Arthur said. "As you all know, Mr. Wexler is stepping down for health reasons. We've decided to appoint a new CEO, someone who understands both the corporate side and the heart of this company's values." A murmur spread around the room. Arthur smiled slightly. "Most of you won't know her name, but you'll know her work." He turned toward the doorway. "Please welcome Miss Thelma Brooks." Every head turned. Thelma stepped into the room, calm, poised, wearing a tailored gray suit and pearls. Gone was the floral dress and straw hat. Her presence commanded quiet respect. Arthur stood and shook her hand. "Thelma, welcome back." "Thank you, Arthur," she said warmly. Her voice was steady, graceful, but her eyes held decades of wisdom and quiet fire. She looked around the table. "Wexler and Sons has lost touch with its people. We're going to fix that, starting from the ground up." 2 weeks later, Chase Turner strutted into work, coffee in hand and arrogance intact. Rumor had it the company's new CEO was arriving that morning to visit the branch. Chase had already told his friends he'd charm her, maybe even get a promotion out of it. He rehearsed his smile in the reflection of the elevator doors. "Always be confident," he muttered to himself. When the elevator dinged open, the office buzzed with nervous excitement. Managers whispered, employees straightened their clothes. Then silence fell. From the lobby doors walked Thelma Brooks, the same old black woman Chase had laughed at 2 weeks earlier. This time, her posture was different. Her head high, her stride firm. She wore an elegant navy suit that matched her authority. Arthur Langford followed behind her, introducing her to everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "please welcome your new CEO, Ms. Thelma Brooks." The room froze. Chase's coffee cup slipped from his hand, splattering across the polished floor. Their eyes met, hers calm and unreadable, his wide with disbelief. For a long second, no one breathed. Then Thelma smiled gently. "Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to work with you all." She glanced toward Chase. Some faces look familiar already. Chase's face turned the color of paper. The days following Thelma Brooks's arrival at Wexler and Sons were like the calm before a thunderstorm, quiet, charged, and unpredictable. Chase Turner barely slept that first night. He kept replaying the moment in his head, the slow reveal, the look in her eyes when she said, "Some faces look familiar already." He'd humiliated her, and now she was his boss. By Wednesday morning, the office buzzed with new energy. Thelma had spent her first 2 days meeting every department, asking questions no one had dared ask before. She didn't sit in a corner office surrounded by glass walls. Instead, she walked the floor, stopping by cubicles, learning names, asking people about their families. "Good morning, Mrs. Daniels," she'd say to the receptionist. "Your daughter's in high school now, isn't she? You must be proud." No one could figure out how she remembered everything. Thelma believed leadership wasn't about control, it was about connection. And she'd learned, through years in classrooms and corporate boardrooms, that respect couldn't be demanded, it had to be earned. Except from Chase Turner. Chase tried to avoid her. He made excuses to skip meetings, delegated small tasks, and hid behind his computer when she passed by. He told himself it would blow over, that someone like her wouldn't last long in corporate leadership. "She's too soft," he whispered to a coworker named Brian. "This place needs a leader, Not a grandma with stories. But Thelma heard more than people thought. Friday morning, Thelma called her first official staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the large conference room, coffee cups in hand, curiosity and nerves filling the air. Chase sat near the back, arms crossed. Thelma entered quietly, carrying a folder and a small notebook. No assistant, no entourage. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and warm. "I won't keep you long. I've reviewed your reports, and you're doing good work. But I noticed something. Your numbers are fine, yet your morale is not." She paused, letting the silence settle. People aren't machines. They remember how they're treated. And if we forget that, we lose more than profit. Several employees nodded, surprised by her tone. Then she looked toward Chase. "Mr. Turner," she said softly. He froze. "Yes, ma'am? You manage the reception and junior staff, don't you?" "Yes," he said cautiously. "How would you describe the environment down there?" He smirked, trying to regain confidence. "Efficient. We keep things professional." "Professional," she repeated, her tone unreadable. "That's good. But professional should never mean unkind." Her eyes held his for a beat too long. Chase's stomach dropped. He wanted to disappear into the floor. She smiled again, releasing the tension. "Starting Monday, I'll be shadowing different departments, yours included. I'd like to understand how our people work." Someone in the back coughed. Chase's pulse raced. The meeting ended shortly after, but whispers followed him all day. Everyone had seen the look she gave him. Everyone knew. When Monday came, Chase arrived early, nervous, sweating, trying to look composed. At exactly 9 o'clock, Thelma appeared in his department. She wore a cream blouse, a simple gold brooch, and a smile that could melt granite. "Morning, Mr. Turner," she said. "Mind if I sit in today?" He forced a grin. "Of course not, Miss Brooks." She spent the morning quietly observing. When employees came to ask questions, she noticed how Chase dismissed them, how he rolled his eyes, how he spoke to the janitor as if the man were invisible. Around noon, she asked if she could see the reception logs. "Sure," Chase said, handing them over. She flipped through them carefully. "Do you remember an envelope from the Magnolia Ridge Community Center a few weeks ago?" He froze. "Maybe. We get a lot of mail." Her eyes didn't move from the paper. "I'm sure you do." He could feel sweat forming at his temples. Thelma closed the folder and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. That'll be all for now." He exhaled in relief, thinking the storm had passed. But it hadn't even begun. Later that week, an internal email went out. Subject: Team Leadership Workshop, attendance mandatory. Chase groaned when he saw his name at the top of the list. Friday afternoon, he and 10 other mid-level managers gathered in the small training hall. Thelma stood at the front with a whiteboard and a stack of papers. "Today," she said, "we're going to talk about leadership through empathy." Chase rolled his eyes. Thelma caught it but continued. "I want each of you to share a story of a time you were underestimated and how you proved people wrong." One by one, people shared, the single mom who finished her degree, the veteran who rebuilt his life. When it was Chase's turn, he shrugged. "I don't really have one. I've worked hard to get where I am. No one ever handed me anything." Thelma tilted her head. "Really? You've never been judged by how you looked? Or where you came from?" He gave a smug smile. "No, can't say I have." She nodded. "Then I suppose you're very fortunate." Her eyes softened. "I know what it's like to be judged before speaking. To be told you don't belong, until you prove you do." Her voice lowered. "But I also know that true character shows not when we're treated poorly, but how we treat others when we hold power." The room fell silent. Even the air conditioners seemed to pause. Chase's jaw tightened. He knew that was for him. Thelma turned back to the board, her hands steady. "Leadership isn't a title. It's a responsibility. And some of us," she glanced over her shoulder, "have to learn that the hard way." By late summer, Thelma's reforms were transforming the company. Employee satisfaction was up, community partnerships restored, and local press had begun calling her the woman who brought soul back to Wexler. Chase, meanwhile, was unraveling. Every report he turned in came back with notes. Every meeting he entered, she seemed one step ahead. One evening, he stayed late, scrolling through old files, searching for something, anything, that could discredit her. He found an old article from the 1980s. Young analyst Thelma Brooks resigns from Mercer Holdings amid corporate shakeup. He smirked. So she wasn't so perfect after all. He printed it, planning to show it to the regional director the next morning. But when he walked into the office early, he found Thelma already there, reading that same article. "I figured you'd find this," she said without looking up. He froze. She held up a hand. "That article's true. I resigned because I refused to approve a deal that would have laid off hundreds of workers. They called me emotional, said I didn't understand business. So I left." She looked up then, her eyes fierce. 2 years later, the company collapsed. I lost everything, but I kept my integrity. That was worth more. Chase's mouth went dry. Thelma stood, walking toward him slowly. "I've seen men like you my whole life. Talented, ambitious, but hollow. You think leadership is a ladder. It's not. It's a mirror. And one day you'll have to look in it." She handed him the paper. "Be careful what you dig for, Mr. Turner. Sometimes you find yourself." Something changed in Chase. He started arriving early, helping staff without being asked. He apologized to the janitor he once ignored. He even joined the community center's reading program, anonymously. People noticed. One morning, Thelma found a small note on her desk. No name, just words written in careful handwriting. "I used to laugh at people who had less power. You showed me what real power looks like. Thank you." She smiled softly and folded the note. Sometimes, change didn't come from punishment. Sometimes, it came from quiet grace. Autumn came early to Magnolia Ridge that year. The leaves along Main Street burned in shades of gold and amber, and the air carried that faint chill that made folks start talking about Thanksgiving plans. For Thelma Brooks, it had been 6 months since she took over as CEO of Wexler & Sons Logistics. The company had changed in ways few thought possible. The break room now had a bulletin board filled with family photos and thank you notes from local schools. Employee turnover had dropped. Productivity was up. And in the corner of the staff parking lot, where weeds once grew, now stood a small community garden, planted by volunteers on company time. Every Friday, Thelma walked through it before heading to her car. It reminded her of life's simple truth: what you water grows. But not everyone had bloomed easily. Chase Turner was still finding his way. On a cool Friday morning, Chase knocked on Thelma's office door. She looked up from her paperwork. "Come in." He stepped inside, holding a folder and his resignation letter. "I wanted to thank you," he began, voice hesitant, "for everything you've taught me." She raised an eyebrow. "You're leaving?" He nodded. "I've been offered a position at the new outreach program in Atlanta, community development. I think it's where I'm supposed to be." She leaned back, studying him. "Community development? Quite a change from corporate strategy." He smiled faintly. "People change." "Yes," she said softly. "Some do." He placed the letter on her desk. "I also wanted to apologize for how I treated you. I was blind." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out a familiar envelope, the same one she'd held that day in the lobby months ago. "Do you remember this?" she asked. Chase's stomach turned. "Yes, ma'am." She tapped it gently. This was a request for a small grant to fund the reading program. "You laughed that day, remember?" His voice cracked. "I do." She smiled faintly. "You should know, that program's now fully funded by Wexler. Thanks to you." He blinked, confused. "Thanks to me." She nodded. "Your mistake brought me here. Had you treated me kindly that day, I might have just dropped this envelope off and gone home. But your arrogance made me realize how badly this company needed change." Her gaze softened. "Sometimes, God uses even our worst moments to write better stories." Chase swallowed hard. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." Thelma chuckled. "Grace isn't something you deserve. It's something you recognize when it's offered." He looked down. "Thank you, Miss Brooks, for not giving up on me." She reached across the desk, patting his hand gently. "Don't thank me. Just pay it forward." A week later, the company hosted its first Community Appreciation Gala, honoring local teachers, volunteers, and longtime employees. The ballroom glowed with soft lights, jazz music floating through the air. Old friends and new colleagues mingled, laughing and sharing stories. Arthur Langford, the chairman, took the stage. "Tonight, we honor someone who reminds us what true leadership looks like," he said. "Someone who has turned profit into purpose and pain into power." He gestured toward Thelma. "Ms. Brooks, would you join us on stage?" Applause filled the room. Thelma walked up slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor, pearls glinting under the lights. She took the microphone, smiling at the familiar faces, employees, teachers, neighbors from Magnolia Ridge. "When I came back home," she began, "I didn't plan to lead anything. I just wanted to serve. I wanted to help children believe they mattered." Her eyes shimmered with memory. "I once worked in a world that didn't believe someone like me could lead. I was the wrong color, the wrong gender, the wrong background. They told me to smile more, talk less, and stay in my lane." She paused, her voice calm but strong. "But I learned something. You can't bury purpose. You can delay it, you can mock it, but you can't kill it." The room was silent. Even the waiters paused to listen. "I stand here today, not as the CEO of a company," she continued, "but as proof that the tables always turn, sometimes slowly, but they do turn. And when they do, how you've treated people becomes your real resume." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but her smile never faded. The audience rose in applause. And at a table near the back, Chase stood too, clapping until his hands stung. The following Monday, Thelma arrived early at the office. Her assistant greeted her with a cup of tea and a letter from corporate. It was her retirement confirmation. She smiled. She had known it was time. She'd done what she came to do. Later that morning, she gathered the staff for an announcement. "My friends," she began, "I'll be stepping down next month. It's time to pass the torch." A ripple of shock moved through the room. "But don't worry," she added, "this company's in good hands." She turned to the back of the room. "Mr. Chase Turner, would you come up here?" Gasps broke out. Chase's eyes widened. "Me?" She nodded. "You've shown heart, humility, and growth. You've learned what leadership truly means. And I believe you'll keep this company's soul alive." He shook his head, overwhelmed. "I'm not ready." She smiled. "Neither was I. You'll learn as you go, that's the only way." She handed him a small box. Inside was her old fountain pen. "Use it to sign something that matters," she said. He blinked back tears. "I will." The day of her retirement, the entire office gathered outside. The sun was warm, the air filled with laughter and the scent of garden flowers. They'd renamed the community garden Thelma's Corner. A brass plaque read, "Planted by hands that gave, watered by hearts that learned." As she prepared to leave, Chase approached her one last time. "I wanted to give you something," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a check, made out to the Magnolia Ridge Community Center. "For the reading program," he said, "double what you asked for the first time." She laughed softly, tears forming. "You remember that? I'll never forget it." They stood there for a moment, the breeze carrying the scent of magnolias. "Ms. Brooks," Chase said, voice thick, "you changed my life." She looked at him, her expression gentle but firm. "No, Chase, you changed your own. I just reminded you who you were meant to be." Then she turned and walked toward her car, the same bus stop where it all began, now just a few feet away. She paused, looking back at the building that once held so much pride and prejudice. "Funny thing," she whispered to herself, "you never really leave a place the same way you entered." Then she smiled, put on her straw hat, and stepped into the sunlight, walking away not as a victim of injustice, but as its quiet conqueror. Magnolia Ridge grew in ways no one expected. Under Chase's leadership, Wexler and Sons became one of the top employers in the state. The reading program expanded, funding scholarships for underprivileged students. Every Friday, Chase visited Thelma's corner to water the flowers himself. And every time he did, he thought of her words. Leadership is a mirror. Make sure you like the reflection. In the evenings, he'd stop by the community center, where kids read from books donated by the company. On the wall above the bookshelf hung a framed quote, engraved beneath Thelma's smiling portrait. Never laugh at someone's season of struggle. You don't know what chapter God's writing next. And that's how the town of Magnolia Ridge learned something that would be told for years to come. That the old black woman the bully laughed at became the CEO who changed everyone's life, including his own. Hidden Tale Stories brings you real-life inspired stories about judgment, prejudice, black, life lesson, moral stories, karma, second chances, and more. Every story ends with a truth you'll never forget. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay tuned for more gripping stories that make you feel, think, and reflect.